Pitchers, do you ever feel like that your front side's pulling off, you're starting your rotation way too early, and you just start to feel like your mechanics are being a little bit thrown off towards that mid to that end season? You're missing glove side, you're pushing the ball arm side. Let's explain this in depth in this next transition video here. My name is Ryan McClellan, founder of all the BSF pitching performances here at Bo Jackson's Elite Sports Domes. We have 3 locations in Lockport, Bensenville, and Columbus, Ohio. Today we're going to break down an important topic that we need to hit upon when it comes to the in-season. So a typical adaptation that you're going to start to see happening as the volume and the intensity increases when we're in season is you're going to start to notice that we're going to lose thoracic rotation mobility to our throwing side. The reason why that's really important to understand from an adaptation standpoint as to what happens in the act of throwing is really crucial when it comes to what you do pre and post throw, because that's going to dictate the way you move obviously during the throwing. What you will tend to see happen is when we hit front foot strike and we're going through acceleration, pronation, deceleration, right? In this deceleration phase, you have to understand that we're stopping rotation down this way. So what's going to end up happening is that our deep spine muscles will eccentrically load to stop rotation down this way. We're going to start to lose that range of motion back around this way. We're going to get tight because we're stopping rotation down this way, right? And so over the course of the season, what you'll tend to see happen, because we're losing the thoracic rotation integrity back this way, is you're going to start to see the release height start to drop. You're going to see your kinematic sequencing, which is the timing of hip to shoulder separation, which again, every athlete interprets that differently, or even a coach interprets that differently, and every athlete is going to have a different amount of degrees of separation between their back shoulder and their back hip in that separation. Now, again, like that's just going to come down to more your structural integrity. Every athlete structurally is made up a little bit different, right? And so because of that, right, no matter who you are as an athlete, like that is a typical adaptation that you're going to see happen. So that's a big reason why, like when you're seeing the front side pull off, rotation starting too early, release height starts to drop, I'm cutting the ball glove side, I'm pushing the ball arm side. A lot of that actually has to do with because of your loss of that thoracic rotation. So again, like that's a really, really important concept that we have to understand and realize as we're throwing more in season. So again, mobility though is a strength through a range of motion, not just a range of motion. Mobility without stability creates more vulnerability to injury, and that's why you have to separate the 2 categories of mobility and flexibility. Like if you're training in the weight room with weight through a full range of motion, that's mobility. You're developing that strength through that range of motion. So again though, like that's why you have to look at this from an overview perspective, right? And so again, when you're going to see happening is you're going to lose that T-spine rotation. So one of the things that we like to implement, instead of just cranking out T-spine rotation, is actually implementing isometric. So one of the best ways that we implement with our athletes is with either manual end range isometric contraction training with the trunk, or you can do DNS type of training, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization training. So you can take a guy on a chair and he can go through T-spine rotation to the best that he can, and then you're going to crunch down this oblique. Now you can keep a med ball in between your knees to lock your hips in place, but what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be squeezing down this oblique. So you're gonna be creating a neurological adaptation because you're contracting that end range, which again, like neurologically, you're gonna develop better thoracic rotation mobility because you're applying that strength and that contraction at that end range. And so when you can keep that integrity really well, that's going to allow you to keep the integrity of your kinematic sequencing, the timing of hip to shoulder separation, the way that the arm path is working with the trunk, and overall just your health, right? Because again, if that thoracic rotation is getting too tight, right, that's also going to start to throw off a little bit of how the scapula is being now positioned on that rib cage, right? Because again, that scapula is a floating bone on top of that rib cage, right? So if we don't have that T-spine rotation mobility, right, you're going to start to see that the function of the scapula might be a little bit off of how it upwardly rotates to function the shoulder overhead. So if that integrity isn't also there, then that's where you're going to start to see the stress of the shoulder and then to the elbow start to increase, right? And that's just that trickle down effect because of that typical adaptation that we tend to see with throwers as the season goes on. So if you're not taking that into consideration based on what you do pre-throw, right, then it's not going to really matter what we try and do to try and chase and force these mechanical positions. Because again, at the end of the day, that's not going to work. We're in season. We got to maintain that competitive edge, that mindset. We can't be mechanically driven in season. That's why guys fall into that trickle-down effect of a mental rut. They overcomplicate their process, they overanalyze their mechanics, and then they get domed up, and that could then, you know, potentially turn into the yips, which we want to stay really far away from, okay? But again, what we do pre and post throw is going to help us dictate the way we move during the throwing. That's why you have to look at this whole entire body as more of a system, not just localizing or pinpointing the reason why you're cutting the ball glove side, missing arm side, all right? So that's why when we're looking at the body as an entire system, how do we keep that integrity? How do we keep the body fresh, strong, and durable enough with the proper mobility that it needs to then go out and execute and to maintain that integrity that we developed so good at in the off season? It's something that we need to take in consideration. When we're taking an athlete in, right, we're understanding their injury history, their training experience, and what was their practical application like? Like what have they been exposed to? But one of the things that we've been seeing when we're getting an athlete who has had an injury or who's experiencing any arm pain, one of the things that we've been seeing more than 50% of the guys coming in, we've tested over 560 athletes, is that when we're testing athletes' thoracic rotation to both sides with the Dynamo from VALD, we're starting to see that the guys who are experiencing the elbow or the shoulder pain or that has had an injury in the past, they actually lose that T-spine rotation to the throwing side. And that's that trickle-down effect that I'm talking about that can lead to shoulder and elbow injury. So if we're starting to see that more than 50% of athletes coming in with that limitation, that just goes to show that the integrity of what we need to do pre-throw to prime that central nervous system, to target the entire system, right, the body, right, that's just going to set up better movements when the throwing begins and staying athletic, right? That's how we optimize mechanics without trying to dome up a guy with chasing mechanical positions, because if they're not reaching those positions or they're not, you know, executing those positions, we got to ask, well, why is that happening, right? And so that's the kind of reason why I just went a little bit into that and what we've been seeing on the testing side. But again, if you're an athlete out there that is struggling, that wants to learn what the proper way of training in season versus off season is, here at BSF, we built a plus and minus system that's also going to teach guys how to move those days around based on when they're throwing live. So the plus days are all the days that they do after, minus days are all the days that they do before. And on our BSF app, athletes can actually shift those days around so that we can make sure that the integrity of the training and the way that we're training guys in season is going to, again, make the body durable and handle the demand that they're going to be experiencing in season with all the stress and the adaptations that's going to naturally occur when the throwing is starting to increase its volume and intensity. So if you're an athlete out there that's looking to learn more, come join us here at BSF Pitcher Performance at all Bo Jackson's Elite Sports Domes.